Hello everyone, welcome to Laravel. My name is William. In this video, I want us to talk about the Laravel hash facade. In computer programming, hashing is a process of converting a piece of string into another piece of string with an idea of concealing what this new piece of string, or in other words, the hashed piece of string, stands for. Hashing is important to protect sensitive data. For example, passwords, API keys, from access to unauthorized persons. It is actually possible for somebody to have access to your system database. If they do so, if you have stored your passwords in plain text, then they will have the user email or the user phone together with the user password. And basically, your security would have been thrown out. And so hashing comes in as a second layer of protection after somebody has maybe done a hack on your system and has acquired your database. Then they should not acquire the user passwords because that will be catastrophic to another. In Laravel, hashing is used by default when working with the passwords. And this you can be able to see when you take a look at the starter kits and just familiarize how the authentication flow works. And it is a best practice to always ensure that you do hashing of the passwords. Laravel uses decrypt by default, but also it supports Argon and Argon 2IT. I would like us to take a look at the code and see how the hashing facade works. And then after we do that, then I believe this video will be able to take you to a level of understanding about what these hashes mean and how we can be able to configure our Laravel application, how we can be able to check the hashes and so on. So work with me and see the code in VS Code. In our Visual Studio Code, we're having this function here that returns our view welcome, and that is the page that we are seeing in our Laravel application when I showed it to you from Chrome. So that is what is returning this view. Now I'd like to comment this out such that you can be able to do some things. So I would like us to have a variable called password, and this variable we are going to store a secret, in this case, which will be the password for a user, for example, in the database. So this can be anything that a user would type in as the password. And then for us to be able to save this password, and of course, when a user is registering in a system, we will have other things together with the password. So it's not only the password that will be provided, but we will also have provision for other. But now, when we are saving the password, we cannot go ahead and save the password as plain text because that is dangerous if in the event somebody has an access to the database. And this has happened even for major software companies actually in recent times for that matter. And people came and they hacked the system and they accessed all the passwords for the users. So if once you access the password and you have the email, then it means that account is compromised. And sometimes you may access the email, but you do not know what the password is. So even if you go to log into that system, you will still have an issue. And you will pay trial and error. And with this hashing, they are very difficult for somebody to be able to guess it. Now, so this password, I would like us to go ahead and hash it. So we can have a variable called hashed, and we can go ahead and hash it using decrypt, the way it is mentioned here. But we can also say hash make, and this we use whichever hashing function that you actually have chosen. So inside here, we will pass in our password. Now, whatever it is that you are going to have here is now how it is going to be saved in the database. So we will save in our database the hashed value. But of course, it is important for me to ensure that I've imported about here the hash facade. Now, after doing that, we can go ahead now and probably dd the value of what we have. So once we do that, I can be able to close this with a semicolon. Now, and I would like us to go back to Chrome and see what we have. So this is where we are at Chrome, and I would like to just refresh and see what we have. So basically, our string, which is called password, has been transformed into a very long string that we have. And so this is what we are going to save in our database. And this long string is a representation of our, our secret password in this case. So it represents the word password for that matter. And now if somebody comes into your database and sees that this is what has been stored as the password, even if they attempt to use it, the system will reject it because the system requires the plain text to compare with the hash value. So if they provide this, nothing will happen, they cannot be able to log in. But if they provide the correct password, then it should be compared with these hash passwords. The ones that the two are compared and they are found to be matching, then you can be able to check and see that they're matching. And of course, if they're matching, then it means the user has actually provided the correct. That means they know the password. But if they do not compare, then the user has provided a wrong password, and you can be able to provide provide feedback to that matter. For a user who has the correct password, you log them in. For a user who has the wrong password in comparison, then you keep them out. And maybe provide an error that maybe those credentials they're using are not matching to whatever it is that you have in the market. So now, how do we check or how do we compare hashes? So for us to be able to compare hashes, this is what we can be able to do. We can say if hash check, hash colon check. Inside here, the first argument is the plain text of the value that we want to compare. And this is the value that is coming from a user. So for example, a user provides something different. So if they provide 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as whatever it is that is the password, then we will compare what the user has provided with what is stored in the password. And in this case, hypothetically, what we have in our password in this case, because that is what we're having above here as the hashed, is technically what we are comparing with. So if 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 compares to hashed and the comparison is true, then we can be able to say that return the password, sort of like the password is valid. That's it. And we have the converse, which is we will check with else. We can be able to return invalid. The auto-completion that I'm having is being done by the Laravel plugin for VS Code. So basically that is what is happening. So probably I could be able to disable it such that we can be able to maybe move on without those interactions. So let me just go to extensions and then look for Laravel. Just like to disable it temporarily. And I will go to this official and disable it. Just for now, I will enable it afterwards. It actually helps. So now I would like us to check. Of course, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is not comparable to what we hashed because what we hashed is password. So let us go to I would like us to go back to VS Code and do a comparison between the passwords that you're having and show you maybe how you can be able to compare hashed password vis-a-vis a password that is not hashed and see whether the two compare to the extent that they are the same or not. And so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to have if hash check. And this is just an event of attempting to check whether what the user has provided for us in plain text is comparable to the actual password. So I'm going to just pass in 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. And then we are going to compare that with the hashed password. So here I will pass in the hashed password. And then after that, we can be able to check if this is true, then we will actually have entered the correct password in this case. So I can be able to have return password is correct. We can have the reverse, which is password is incorrect. And I would like to comment this one out and attempt to check. So obviously, 1, 2, 3 is not the same as what we hashed here because what we hashed is password. So that if a passed here should be the correct one. But in this case, we are passing 1, 2, 3, 4. So we expect that our application will tell us that the password is incorrect. So let us go ahead and attempt to check. In our browser, I would like to just refresh. Now you're having the password is incorrect. If we go back and change this password and put the correct value that is in the comparison. So if a user provides the correct value of the password, then we can go ahead and check again. And when we refresh, we now have the password is correct. So basically, that is how you can compare. And in this case, if you're working with a database, then this hashed password is what is stored in the database column. And then the password, this one that is in plain text, is what our user is providing. So basically, that is how you can work with hashes. It is still possible for us to do a rehash. And this is specifically to the places where we have been able to do a change of maybe the settings of your cryptographic function in this case. But before we look at that, I would like us first of all to publish the configuration file for hashing such that we talk about one or two things. So we can go ahead in our Visual Studio Code and be able to run the command php to publish :config, and we can say hashing like that. So that is the configuration file we would like to publish. I have inverted the command, so the command should be php config publish. Then we can be able to pass in the name, which is hashing, like that. And now the configuration file is published. If we open config, we have the configuration directory, we have hashing. .php, and this contains the settings. So in this case, the default driver is bcrypt. If we go to our env, the hash driver is maybe not inputted as of now, but you can be able to put some of those things. So here you can see the only thing about bcrypt is the rounds, which have been set to 12 in the env. There is no other thing that has been provisioned about hashing here. Obviously, you can also be able to add them with the key that is provided within our configuration file. So let me go back to our config file. So you can be able to have hash driver and set it in the env, and then you can be able to select it dynamically. Now, these are the settings for bcrypt, and for bcrypt, you just provide the rounds. The rounds in this case are 12. The higher the value of the rounds, the better the hashing. Or in other words, the stronger the hashing. And in this case, the more difficult it is for somebody to be able to to be able to check and find out what that value of the password was in this case. So if you increase this value, you will have a trade-off of speed. So the higher the hashing value, the more time it you take for your application to be able to hash a value. So for example, if we change this to around 17, it will take us almost 500 milliseconds by estimation for us to be able to hash a single password. And so it's a trade-off that one can be able to have between security and the intensity of use of the heaviness of whatever it is that you're doing in this case. Then we have Argon. In Argon, when you're setting the values for Argon, in other words, the configuration for Argon, you have to set memory, and then you also have to set time and probably place. We also have hash to verify, and in this case, for both of them, it has been set to true. And what this means is that if you are doing a hash, for example, I would like to use the bcrypt example because it has simple, it has fewer variables. If you are having hashing as well, and somebody comes and provides your application with a hash that maybe is Argon, or maybe provides your application with a hashing that is bcrypt, but it is of a different value compared to what you have set in your application, then your application will reject that as malicious because it will attempt to verify what is it that I have in my settings. In this case, what is it that I have that is set in the config? If those hashes differ, then it will kick out that user. They will not be able to access the application. And then we also lastly have this rehash on login. And for this matter, it has been set to true. And this one, what it does is sometimes you may set, the way we have set the bcrypt rounds to 12, and then afterwards go to your setting of your application and decide to tighten it a bit and maybe put 13 or 14 or 15, whatever it is that you decide to do. Your application initially was doing hashing for 12 rounds. And even what has been sent mostly in the database is 12 rounds. So in this case, once you change it like that, if a user logs in and the application's hashing was changed, then what happens? The system will rehash. Now using the new set number of rounds in this case. And by doing so, it will be very helpful to ensure that your hashes will be upgraded gracefully without any further intervention. But in the event that you want to always take care of rehashing, you also have to ensure that you have provided that functionality within your application. And this is what you can be able to do. So I will go back to our web.php, and here you can be able to just do this for you to be able to ensure that your passwords are rehashed every single time. So we can have a new function, and we can say hash means rehash. We have said the rehash will happen when you have changed or modified the routes within your application. So basically, the system will be able to take care of the hashing and ensure that it has rehashed the hashes such that your users will have seamless um, operation within your application. So inside here, we can pass again the hashed with that. And then after that, we can return. Um, Maybe we can again just have hashed again, hashed. And in this case, you can say hash me, um, hash me, again passing the password in a similar way as you did above. So basically, that is how you can be able to go ahead and do. Hopefully, I believe this video has been useful to the extent of maybe attempting to explain how hashing works. If you like the video, please give us a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel and this is your first video to watch, please ensure you subscribe to this channel and click on the notification bell so that you'll be notified whenever we upload another useful video. If you have a comment, a compliment, or even a question, you can be able to shoot in the comment section below.